Hey guys, and welcome to Lesson 3, the beginning of the war. It says shots fired. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter took place in April of 1861, not long after Lincoln was elected and inaugurated, and then we had all of those states start to secede from the Union, all the way from January to April. Over 11 states at this point have already seceded, and tensions are high. So the South has seceded and claimed that it is a new nation, and something that is upsetting to the Northerners is that now the South is requesting that any Northern soldiers who are stationed in forts that now exist in the new nation that is the Confederate States of America be removed. Well, one of those forts is Fort Sumter, located in South Carolina. It was a fort long before the South had seceded, and there were Union soldiers in the fort. Fort Sumter was not the only fort that was in this situation. There were a lot of places that were technically still inhabited by Union soldiers even after the Confederate States had been formed. So Fort Sumter was, like I said, in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, the Union forces inside Fort Sumter were low on ammunition and food. So what President Lincoln, had to do was decide if he was going to either send food and ammunition to his forts, whether he was going to just send things like food, or whether he was going to not send anything at all and evacuate his troops. Well, instead of evacuating and instead of sending ammunitions, he thought it might be a good idea, we're going to tell the South that unfortunately, these Union men are going to die if they don't get food. That's all we're sending them. We're not sending them more things to fight against you with. So please don't fire. Well, the South, though, did not take kindly to the fact that they were still there and that they weren't being evacuated like they asked, which caused a siege on Fort Sumter. So a siege is when people try and take an area. So they're attacking the fort, which is well fortified. That's where the word fort comes for. It's well protected. But because they were already so low on ammunition and food, the Union forces surrendered the next day, making the South, the Confederates, the new owner of Fort Sumter. Now, nobody was killed during the actual battle. However, a fun fact is that there was a person killed in a 50-gun salute to salute the flag. After the battle. So no actual casualties of war, but there were casualties nonetheless. This is a picture of Fort Sumter before the Civil War. Notice these nice big walls around the outside. Not something that you're just going to shoot a couple of cannons at and be able to take it over. These are also the Whitworth Rifles, which was a major brigade that was in defense of Charleston. And we see the Union siege guns that were mounted in defense of Washington in 1864. So this is just another example of some Civil War era ammunition. So this is a Union siege gun. Okay. And then between Fort Sumter and Gettysburg, we have a long string of Confederate victories. Most of the fighting is done and the Confederates are winning. At this point, it seems like the South might actually win this war. And then we get to the Battle of Gettysburg. So the Battle of Gettysburg is known as the turning point of the war. Confederate forces under Lee were trying to invade the North. Gettysburg is located in Pennsylvania, so this was one of the first attempts that the South had made to actually make it back into United States territory, because most of the fighting had been done in the South. However, as they were trying to invade the North, they were stopped by Union forces in a battle that looked like they should have won. After 3 days of almost nonstop fighting in the middle of July, the South has to flee, leaving the Union to win. And after the Battle of Gettysburg, the Southern forces were so decimated and so depleted, they had very little food. Deserting was becoming a big issue, meaning the soldiers were starting to leave because they weren't able to eat or find shelter. Things got really bad for the South really fast. Afterwards, President Lincoln made a speech at a ceremony that was dedicating the site as a cemetery. We know it as the Gettysburg Address. It was only 3 minutes, but it is one of the most famous and inspiring speeches in American history. We're going to talk about that when we do our activity the next day. And then in the speech, Lincoln told people that the Civil War was to preserve a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So that's a very famous quote by Abraham Lincoln, and it was given after the Battle of Gettysburg, which essentially was the turning point. The South had been winning all the way up until Gettysburg, but by Gettysburg, they had no shot, really, at winning that war. Okay, this is also the only confirmed photo of Lincoln at Gettysburg. Notice him over here. Well, no, he's right here. I'm sorry. He's right here in the middle. We see his iconic little top hat. He is reading his speech, talking about Gettysburg, which is pretty cool. Another cool picture, these are mortars that they would have used in 1862. These are essentially cannons that are shot from below a lower point in the ground, which is pretty cool. We see the little cannonballs over here. So these are just some interesting pictures. But I really do want you to know this right here. Gettysburg is the turning point of the war. Fort Sumter was the very beginning of the war. Civil War began with Fort Sumter in April of 1861. The South was winning, and then along comes July of 1863, and Gettysburg completely turns the tide. Be sure to read through some of the information below. You don't have to read through all of it, but it's going to be really interesting. It's going to help you to remember stuff. If you learn better by reading, then it's all there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and I will see you historians tomorrow.